Hi everyone and welcome. Thanks for joining us today at the NECA technical webinar. Today's topic is based on Amendment 1 to the wiring rules and the new Electricity Safety Regulations 2019, which came out in December 2019. I'm your host Chandel, and before we begin I just would like to go through a couple of housekeeping with you. You'll be put on mute during the presentation to reduce any background noise and disruptions. Should you wish to ask a question, please raise your hand to type the question in the chat box. If you're dialing in, please press *9. The presenters ask that all questions are saved to the end of the presentation. So I'll now pass you on to Michael Weeks, our technical manager. He'll present today on the mentioned topics. Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, Chandel. Hello, everyone. My name's Michael Weeks. I'm the Technical Manager at NECA Victoria. Today, we're just going to have a quick overview of the new regulations and a couple of the key points in the Amendment 1 of the wiring rules. So, as of late last year, Energy Safe Victoria released the new regulations. Regulations in Victoria have a lifespan of 10 years. Hence, we started off with the 1999 regulations, which sunsetted in 2009. The 2009 regulations have now sunsetted, and we're now operating under the new Electricity Safety General Regulations of 2019. The change of the name was due to the fact that we're not just talking about installations anymore, as they were in the 99 and 2009 regulations. These regulations now cover a lot of other things, including the requirements for a lot of the electricity distributors. The Minister enacted these and passed them through legislation on the 29th of November 2019, and the regulations came into effect on the 6th of December 2019. Some of the things that haven't changed: general wiring methods for electrical installations. A person must not install, alter, repair or maintain an electrical installation or a portion of electrical installation unless the installation is installed, altered, repaired or maintained and that part complies with. And the main part we need to look at is Division 1 to 9 of the regulations and Part 2 of the wiring rules. They've also called up high voltage electrical installations, Australian Standard 2067. So Appendix K, that was in the wiring rules, is no longer called up at all. Repairs can be done. So if you're doing a repair, you can use Part 1 of the Australian and New Zealand wiring rules other than Clause 1.94. So you need to look at the regulations and have a look and see if the regulations are covered under, if your repairs are covered under the regulations. Some of the main changes: insulation resistance of underground consumer mains. Previously, all testing had to be done and you just need to have 1 meg ohm, a minimum of 1 meg ohm insulation resistance for all undergrounds. Now they've taken up the table out of the service and installation rules, and the longer the cable, the shorter the cable, so up to 50 metres, you must have a minimum of 50 meg ohms. And greater than 250 metres on a new installation has to have 5 meg ohms of insulation resistance. If you are doing an existing repair, then you can rely back on the old rule of, or requirement of 1 meg ohm when tested at 500 volts DC with an insulation resistance tester. The general regulations also calls up specific standards. So they're called up not just in the wiring rules now, they're also called up in legislation. So 3003 for medical patient areas, 5033 for photovoltaic arrays. Testing of battery systems is now called up in the new standard, ASNZ 5139. Testing of grid connector inverter systems, and they've actually specified the anti-islanding requirements. So this is now called up in legislation, not just by the standards. One important change to the regulations is they've now mandated the requirements for the supervision of apprentices to carry out electrical installation work. So an employer, such as a contractor or a factory, now must ensure that an apprentice is supervised as per the apprentice supervision requirements as set out by Energy Safe Victoria. And when a licensed electrician is being delegated the responsibility by their employer to supervise the apprentice, that person now has legal responsibilities as well to act within the apprentice supervision requirements. Energy Safe has also now legislated for people for carrying out work on energised electrical equipment. So under the Act, it says you shall not do work on anything live unless you take adequate precautions. They've now tried to legislate those safety requirements if you are going to work on energised electrical equipment. So a person conducting a business, such as an REC, must ensure that work carried out on energised electrical equipment must ensure that the electrical installation work is carried out by a competent person who has the tools, testing equipment, and personal protective equipment that are suitable for the work, have been properly tested, and are maintained in a good working order, and in accordance with the Safe Work Method Statement prepared for the work. Again, a person conducting a business or undertaking that is carrying out electrical installation work or work on electrical or energised electrical equipment must ensure, so far as practically reasonable, that the person who carries out the electrical installation work uses the tools, testing equipment, and personal protective equipment properly. So this all comes down to your occupational health and safety requirements and your on-site testing and training. For the purpose of the regulations, the Safe Work Method Statement must identify the electrical installation work, specify the hazards and risks associated with those hazards, describe the measures to be implemented to control the risk, and describe how the measures referred to in paragraph C are to be implemented. So they've actually gone down to the level of actually prescribing how the Safe Work Method Statement will be completed. A brief overview of Amendment 1 to the ASNZ 3000, 2018, the wiring rules. For those members who are using TKB, this has been now updated onto the TKB system, and it is highlighted in red the clauses that have been altered. We're not going to go through all the clauses here today. We'll just go through a couple of them. Most of the changes were just grammatical, so a lot of colons and semicolons and then spelling mistakes were fixed up. So we don't need to go through those. You can just have a look through your book and have a look through TKB and see what the changes are. Some of the main changes, clause 2.5.7.2.3, they've added some requirements. So you don't need to do a discrimination study for circuit breakers under 80 amps, as this is very difficult with miniature circuit breakers. One important point that you need to be aware of is if you are putting air extraction systems in, these include range hoods, fans, and the like, you must advise the customer to have their fluid combustion appliances tested by a competent person to ensure correct operation. We at NECA are recommending that you note this on your certificates of electrical safety to show that you have notified the owner or occupier of a premises that they are required to have their gas equipment tested by a competent person to ensure that there's no carbon monoxide poisoning risk. A lot of the other changes within the Amendment 1 were just slight changes to identify some of the things that were missing in the drawings. So with this drawing here, the fixed shower alternative plumbing connections were not indicated on the drawings on the left. So in Amendment 1, it shows that it covers the ceiling mounted plumbing fixtures as well as the wall mounted fixtures. They've reintroduced the table for fault loop impedance with the circuit protection devices and circuit lengths, which is very handy for working your calculations out. the clause 3.4.1, they added the following new excerpt to the end of the third paragraph. Exception, this requirement does not apply to existing wiring systems when extending or altering the circuit. This now allows for the addition to electrical circuits that are only V60 insulation or V75 type insulation in domestic installations that can be extended with a V90 TPS insulation cable with a 16 amp circuit protection device. Exempts the assumption that thermal insulation is always present in domestic installations. If this wasn't in the case, you would only be able to put a 12 amp circuit breaker on any additional add-ons to existing circuits. A quick touch on the proposed Amendment 2 to the wiring rules, which was due to come out this year, which will probably be late, very late this year, or possibly late early next year due to the current situations. So 4 of the main possible changes, and these are emergency changes to the wiring rules. The correction to allow live paths to be behind an escutcheon or panel socket outlet. This was under the current wiring rules, you cannot access any live parts, which makes our job a little bit difficult. So there's just a change in the terminology. There's a planned requirement to test RCDs when supply is not available. This is currently exempt in Australia because you need to have power onto the RCD to test for testing the test function on the RCD. So they're planning to change that requirement. Combining of 2 of the tests, the correct circuit connections and the polarity, this has been determined to be the same test. So they're going to combine those into one. And the reinstatement of ASNZ 61439 with limitations. This is the requirement for switchboards to be constructed and tested. This is still being discussed, and these are all just draft amendments at this stage. So if you do have any comments on any of these or you want further clarification, feel free to email me on the details at the end of this presentation. NECA Victoria fully promotes and hopes most of our members are using the technical knowledge base. All of the information that we've talked about today is on the TKB and all the changes. So if you do need to know that, well, you should all need to know the changes to the wiring rules, especially the technical requirements. These are all on your TKB, which is free with your membership. So please have a look at that. If you have any problems, please email NECA and we can assist you with your signing up on that. Any questions?
Thanks, Michael, for that interesting presentation. Found the content really useful and hope that our listeners did too. If you have any questions or comments, please raise your hand now or type the question in the chat box. You're more than welcome to remain anonymous, but if you feel comfortable, please introduce yourself. So I have a couple of questions that have come through during the presentation, Michael, if you'd like to address those. The first one is, why do the insulation resistance values have to change over the distance?
The insulation resistance, like we were discussing previously, the requirement was for 1 megohm as for normal insulation resistance testing. But any underground service that was measuring at 1 megohm over a period of time will deteriorate. So that will obviously fail at some stage. So that's why power companies would not accept anything less than 50 megohms on a shorter run. So it's just a good practice, and no good electrician would accept 1 megohm for a brand new installation on underground mains. So clearly there will be some leakage in the cables across distances. So that's why they haven't just said 50 megohm across a great big long run. There will be some leakage, and that's been calculated to be a safe level.
Great, okay. And another question that's come through, why can I only use a 16 amp circuit breaker on a power circuit? If
you have a look in the wiring rules, all domestic installations are deemed to have thermal insulation inside the wall, whether it's installed or not. This is there is a possibility that a government organisation may fund a insulation scheme to put insulation in walls to help build up the star rating of properties. So the cables have to be rated for this further possible installation of thermal insulation. If you have a look at the 3008, the cable selection standard, in that book it says that cables installed in thermal insulation shall only be rated at 12 amps. But if the cable is supported and is V90 or better, then you can use the XLPE cable tables on the next page, which deems that you can use 16 amps fully surrounded in thermal insulation inside a wall. Thank you, Shandor.
Right. And finally, the last question that's come through is, how do I test a safety switch without power?
This will be a major concern for the industry. You will have to have a power supply available on site. So this may include having an inverter system built into your car so that you can energise the RCD to confirm the test function on the RCD. We see this as a major impost on the industry and would encourage you to contact NECA about your concerns or questions in this matter. Please email all your questions to technical@neca.asn.au as seen on the screen.
Great, thanks Michael for taking the time to speak to our members today. Thanks to all those that took the time to join us as well. Recordings will be available if you want to re-watch or rehear and share this with any of your other team members and colleagues. Our next webinar will be next Wednesday at 11 o'clock. We do have a full schedule that can be found on our website, so certainly please register even if you can't attend, as we'll share the recordings with you. Thanks again, Michael, and enjoy the rest of your day to all our members. Thank you.